The moment I realized they weren't coming back, I was standing in the fluorescent light of a pilot truck stop bathroom, staring at my own reflection in a mirror. Someone had drawn a smiley face on in lipstick. My phone was in my stepfather's glove compartment. My purse was in the back seat of his Tahoe. I had walked into that bathroom with nothing but the cardigan I'd grabbed off the seat, and a half-empty pack of gum I found in my pocket. And somewhere out on I-40, heading east toward Nashville without me, was my entire family. I want to be clear about something before I tell you what happened next. This wasn't an accident. They didn't forget me. My stepfather made a left turn out of that parking lot on purpose, and my mother was in the passenger seat watching him do it. I'd been part of this family for 22 years. You'd think that would count for something. My name is Renee, and I'm 31 years old. What I'm about to tell you happened 3 years ago, during what was supposed to be a long weekend trip from Memphis to my cousin's baby shower in Knoxville. 5 hours each way, my stepfather driving, my mother up front, my younger stepsister Becca in the middle row, and me in the back with a canvas tote bag full of snacks and a paperback novel I never got to finish. I should have known something was wrong by the way the morning started. We were supposed to leave at 8. I was up at 7, showered, bags by the door. My stepfather, Dale, came downstairs at 9:15 in no particular hurry, poured himself a full cup of coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and scrolled through his phone for 20 minutes while I stood there in my coat. My mother didn't say anything to him. She just refilled his mug when it got low. That was the dynamic. That had always been the dynamic. Dale set the pace. The rest of us adjusted. He married my mother when I was 9 years old. I want to be fair. There were years, early years, when things were fine. He came to my school plays. He taught me how to check my tire pressure. He wasn't cruel in the obvious ways, but there was always this undercurrent, this sense that I was a guest in my own home, that I was tolerated rather than welcomed. And as I got older and started forming opinions and taking up space in ways that didn't defer to him automatically, that feeling got harder to ignore. Becca was his daughter from his first marriage. She was 24, lived 30 minutes from my mom and Dale, came over for dinner 3 times a week. She and my mother had developed a closeness over the years that I hadn't been part of, and I'd made peace with that, or at least I thought I had. I lived in Atlanta. I came home for holidays and the occasional long weekend. I tried not to need too much. The baby shower was for our cousin Trish, and I'd genuinely been looking forward to it. New baby, extended family I hadn't seen in a while, a reason to take 3 days off work. I'd driven up to Memphis on Thursday night, and planned to ride with them Friday morning so we could all go together. We didn't leave until 9:47. The first 2 hours were mostly quiet. My mother and Dale talked about some neighbor's fence situation that I had no context for. Becca was on her phone with her earbuds in. I watched this landscape shift from city to highway, read a little, ate some of the trail mix I'd packed. Somewhere past Jackson, Dale made a comment that I should have paid more attention to. He said, without looking back at me, "Hope you're not one of those people who panics when things don't go according to plan." I said, "What do you mean?" He just smiled at the road. "Nothing. Forget it." I forgot it. We stopped at a pilot station just east of Cookeville. It was a big one, the kind with a subway inside and a whole wall of branded Buck truck stop merchandise, mugs, keychains, those little state-shaped magnets. I used the bathroom, took my time because my back was stiff from the drive, washed my hands twice, and bought a Diet Coke from the machine by the door. When I walked back out to the parking lot, the Tahoe was gone. I stood there for a moment, doing that thing your brain does where it tries to convince you that you're simply mistaken. Wrong row, wrong section. I walked up and down the length of that parking lot twice. There were a dozen vehicles, none of them Dale's dark green Chevy Tahoe, with the University of Memphis sticker on the rear window. They were gone. I went back inside and asked the cashier if I could use the store phone to call my mother. The woman behind the counter, maybe 50 years old, reading glasses on a beaded chain around her neck, looked at me over those glasses and said, "Honey, did your people leave you?" I heard myself say, "I think there might have been a miscommunication." She slid the phone across the counter without another word. My mother picked up on the second ring, Renee. Her voice was even, not panicked, not rushing to explain, just my name, like she'd been expecting this call. "Where are you?" I said. I heard Dale in the background say something, and then my mother said, "We're back on the highway." "What do you mean you're back on the highway?" "I was in the bathroom for 5 minutes." There was a pause. Then I heard Becca laugh. Not a surprised laugh, not an uncomfortable laugh. A laugh like someone watching a bit pay off exactly the way they expected. "It's just a prank, Renee," my mother said. "We'll circle back in a little while, relax. You left me at a truck stop on the interstate, I said. I don't have my phone. I don't have my wallet. I have literally nothing. You have your cardigan, she said. And then the line went quiet, and I realized Dale had put on music. Something country. Like they'd already moved on. The cashier was pretending not to listen but absolutely was listening. I handed her back the phone and said thank you, and walked to the furthest corner of the little seating area near the subway counter and sat down. I want to describe what that moment felt like, because it's important, and because I've spent a lot of time trying to find words for it. It wasn't panic. It wasn't even sadness, not yet. It was something closer to a rearrangement. Like I was looking at a picture I'd been staring at my whole life and finally seeing what it actually was. Every time Dale made a comment that my mother laughed off. Every holiday where I felt like an obligation. Every time Becca got the room with the better light, and I said nothing because it wasn't worth the disruption. Every tiny moment where I'd chosen to overlook something, rather than make things uncomfortable. It all landed at once, right there under the fluorescent lights of a truck stop in Middle Tennessee. I sat there for about 10 minutes. Then I got up, went back to the counter, and asked the cashier. Her name was Darlene, I saw it on her name tag. If there was anywhere nearby I could get something to eat and wait. Somewhere with Wi-Fi. She said there was a diner about a mile and a half up the frontage road. A place called Patton's. She said she'd seen people walk it before. It wasn't bad in good weather. Then she looked at my cardigan and said, "You want to borrow a jacket?" I said I couldn't take her jacket. She said, "It's an old one I keep in the back for when the AC gets too cold. You bring it back before you leave or don't, either way." Her name was Darlene, and I have thought about her more times than I can count. The jacket was a faded green fleece. I walked that mile and a half in it with my head down against the wind, past a Dollar General and a tire shop with a handwritten sign in the window, and I thought about my mother's voice on that phone. Not distressed. Not in a hurry. She knew where I was. She just wasn't coming. How long had they been planning it? That was the question that kept surfacing. Because someone had to have suggested it. Someone had to have said, "Let's do it at the next stop," and someone else had to have agreed, and then someone had to have timed it, waited until I was inside, put the car in drive. That required coordination. That required everyone in that vehicle to choose, one by one, to go along with it. My mother, Dale, my stepsister. All three. Patton's Diner had the kind of booths with cracked red vinyl seats and laminated menus that hadn't changed since the 90s. It smelled like coffee and bacon grease in the best possible way. A woman about my grandmother's age was working the counter, and she waved me toward a booth without asking any questions, which I was grateful for, because I wasn't sure I could explain myself without my voice breaking. I told her I was stranded and asked if I could sit and use their Wi-Fi while I figured out my situation. She set a cup of coffee in front of me and a little ceramic creamer, shaped like a cow, and said, "You sit as long as you need, sweetheart." Her name was June, she told me later. She and her husband had owned that diner for 31 years. I sat in that booth and I tried to think through my options. I had no phone, no cash, no credit card. I had the address for the baby shower in Knoxville in my memory, because I'd looked it up enough times that it had stuck. A church hall on Holston Hills Road. I had a half-pack of gum and a paperback I'd left in the car. I was wearing jeans and a gray t-shirt and a borrowed green fleece. I asked June if the diner had a landline I could use again, and she pointed me to a phone on the wall near the kitchen. I called my mother 3 more times. It rang through to voicemail each time. I called my cousin Trish, whose number I also had memorized because I'd called it from a landline at my office once and never deleted it from my head. She picked up immediately. "Rennie, why are you calling for some random number? Where are you?" I told her. There was a long silence. Then she said, "Are you serious? Yeah? They left you. They called it a prank." Another silence. "I'm 3 hours away from you right now. I'm literally in Knoxville already, setting up for tomorrow." She paused. "Okay, stay where you are. I'm going to call my brother. He's still in Nashville. He can come get you." Her brother, my cousin Marcus. And I realized that's a name on the list I was given, so let me be precise. This is not Marcus from any other story. This is my cousin Trisha's brother, a man I'd known since we were in middle school together, who drove a beat-up white Honda Civic and showed up at Patton's Diner in Cookeville, Tennessee, 2 hours and 40 minutes later, with a large Dunkin' coffee and a look on his face like he was ready to fight somebody. He put the coffee on the table in front of me, sat down across from me, and said, "Tell me everything," so I did. While I talked, June came by twice to refill my coffee and once to slide a plate of scrambled eggs and toast onto the table and wave off my attempt to say I couldn't pay. "Eat," she said in a tone that didn't invite discussion. I ate. Trish's brother listened to the whole thing without interrupting. When I finished, he didn't say anything right away. He just looked out the window at the parking lot for a moment. Then he said, "You know what the worst part is? It's not that they did it. It's that they weren't scared. They didn't think there'd be consequences." That landed somewhere deep in my chest. We drove the 2.5 hours to Knoxville. I borrowed his phone charger and plugged in his phone to make a few calls from the passenger seat. Called my own number twice to see if anyone would pick up, and no one did. When we pulled up to the hotel where some of the family was staying for the shower weekend, Trish was waiting in the parking lot. She hugged me for a long time without saying anything. Then she pulled back and looked at me and said, "Your mom called me. She says it was just a joke and you're being sensitive." I nodded. I wasn't surprised. And Dale apparently thinks it's hilarious. He's been telling people the story. Who's he telling? Whoever would listen, I guess. I thought about that as we walked inside. Dale was at the front desk of the story he was telling. He was the one who'd pulled it off. He was the architect of the whole thing, and the telling of it was part of the entertainment. Look what we did. Look how funny it was. She should have seen her face. I had been a bit. A punchline. A prop. In the hotel room, Trish lent me a toothbrush and a phone charger, and a change of clothes. I sat on the edge of the bed and finally let myself look at my actual phone, which Trish's brother had retrieved from the Tahoe. My mother had called him, finally, when she realized I wasn't coming to the hotel on my own. I had 17 text messages, 3 from my mother, 12 from Becca, 2 from Dale. My mother's messages said, in order, "We're at the hotel. Where are you? Call me when you get this." Then, "Renee, I don't understand why you're making this into such a big deal." Then, "People are asking where you are." Becca's 12 messages were a mix of things. Some asking where I was, a few with laughing emojis, one that said "we thought you'd think it was funny," and one, near the bottom, that said "why are you always so dramatic?" Dale's 2 messages said, "We waited 20 extra minutes, you know," and "your mom is upset." I read all of them. I put the phone face down on the nightstand. I went to Trish's baby shower the next morning. I put on the dress Trish helped me borrow from her sister-in-law, did my makeup in her bathroom mirror, and I went. I held the new baby gifts, I ate the little finger sandwiches, I smiled at aunts I hadn't seen in 2 years. My mother was there. She hugged me when she saw me, a quick tight hug, and said, "I'm glad you made it, I knew you'd be fine." Like the sentence ended there. Like "I knew you'd be fine" was the same thing as "I'm sorry." Dale shook my hand like I was a business acquaintance. Becca didn't make eye contact with me the entire day. Trish's mother, my Aunt Shirley, and I want to remember to say her name correctly because she deserves to be named, pulled me aside at one point near the dessert table and put her hand on my arm and said, "Baby, are you really okay?" I said, "I'm fine." She looked at me for a long moment. She said, "You know you don't have to keep choosing people who treat you like an inconvenience." I didn't say anything back. I just looked at the little frosted sugar cookies, shaped like baby onesies, and thought about a green fleece jacket hanging on a hook behind a truck stop counter in Cookeville. On Sunday morning, after the shower was over and people were checking out and loading cars, my mother came to my room. She sat on the edge of the chair by the window and she said, "I hope you're not going to let this ruin everything." I asked her what everything meant. She said, "Things are good right now. Dale and I are good. Becca and I are good. I don't want you to come in and upset that." I looked at her for a long time. She was wearing her good pearl earrings and the blue cardigan she always wore to family things. She looked exactly like my mother. Exactly like the woman whose hand I held in the hospital when my grandmother died. Exactly like the woman who used to make me cinnamon toast on snow days when we were kids, just the 2 of us as us, before Dale and before Becca and before everything got rearranged. I said, "Mom, I was stranded on the interstate with no phone and no money." She said, "You found your way though, you always do." There was something in her voice when she said it. Not pride, not relief, something more like resignation. Like she had decided, somewhere along the way, that my ability to handle things on my own was the same as not needing to be protected. Like my competence had become permission to leave me behind. I said, "I love you." And then I said, "I'm going to go now." I drove home to Atlanta that day. It's a 4.5-hour drive from Knoxville, and I drove it all without music or podcasts, just the road. I stopped at a Buc-ee's outside Chattanooga and bought an enormous sweet tea and a bag of the cinnamon-glazed pecans they sell near the register, and I sat in the parking lot for a few minutes before getting back on the highway. I thought about Darlene and her green jacket. I had folded it and left it with June at Patton's Diner, along with a note with my name and address asking them to donate it if Darlene didn't want it back. I'd also left 2 20s from the cash I'd borrowed from Trisha's brother to cover the coffee and eggs. I thought about Trisha's brother driving 2 hours and 40 minutes without being asked twice. I thought about June putting scrambled eggs in front of me and using a tone of voice that didn't invite discussion. And I thought about what my Aunt Shirley had said by the dessert table. And I thought about it for a long time. When I got back to Atlanta, I sat in my parked car in the lot under my apartment building for a few minutes. I didn't cry. I'd cried in the hotel shower the night before, and that felt like it had been sufficient. What I felt now was quieter than crying. Went upstairs. I made myself dinner. I called Trish to let her know I'd gotten home, and she said, "I've been thinking about you all day." And I said I knew, and I thanked her. I didn't call my mother that night, or the next night, or the one after that. She called me twice in the first week. The first call I let go to voicemail. She said she just wanted to make sure I got home safe, and did I want to come for Thanksgiving? Dale's brother's family was coming, and it would be good to have me there. The second call, I also let go to voicemail. She said she felt like I was punishing her. I wasn't punishing her. I was just finally, for the first time in 31 years, taking up exactly as much space as I needed and leaving everyone else to fill in the rest. Becca texted me about 6 weeks after the trip. The message said, "Hey, I know things are weird. I just wanted to say I didn't really think it would go the way it did." I read that message several times. I thought about the 12 texts she'd sent at the hotel, the laughing emojis, the "why are you always so dramatic?" I thought about the sound of her laughing in the background when my mother was on the phone with me at that truck stop. Not the laugh of someone who was uncomfortable. The laugh of someone who was pleased. I didn't respond. 6 weeks after that, I got a card in the mail. Physical card, handwritten, my mother's handwriting. It said she was sorry I'd been upset. It said family was complicated. It said she hoped we could move forward. I kept the card. I put it in a drawer. I haven't moved forward the way she meant it, and I haven't moved backward either. What I have done is this. I started going to therapy. My therapist's name is Dr. Kwan, and she is approximately the most direct human being I've ever met, which is exactly what I needed. In one of our early sessions, I described the whole trip, start to finish, and when I finished, she said, "What do you think that day was telling you?" I said, "That they don't value me the way I'd hoped." She said, "And before that day, were there signs?" I thought about it. I said, "Yes. A lot of them." She said, "So what changed?" And I had to think about that for a while before I answered. What changed was that they didn't hide it anymore. Before, the cruelty had always come wrapped in something, a joke, a misunderstanding, an accusation that I was too sensitive. But leaving me at a truck stop on the interstate and calling it a prank stripped all that away. They showed me exactly what they thought of me, and they did it in front of each other, and they laughed while they did it, and then they drove away. You can't unsee that. It's been 3 years now. I still talk to my mother, but differently. Shorter calls, more distance, less hope that the conversation will turn into something it's never been. I haven't seen Dale. I haven't seen Becca. Trish and I are closer than we've ever been. We talk on the phone most Sundays, and she sends me pictures of her daughter, who is 3 now and looks exactly like Trish did at that age. I think about the highway sometimes, driving long stretches of I-75 for work or heading somewhere for a weekend. I think about what it felt like to walk out of that truck stop bathroom and find the parking lot empty. I think about Darlene's green fleece jacket and June's scrambled eggs and Trisha's brother showing up with a Dunkin' coffee like he was going to war. I think about my Aunt Shirley at the dessert table. You don't have to keep choosing people who treat you like an inconvenience. I wasn't choosing them consciously. I was choosing them by default, the way you choose things when you can't imagine another option. But that day on I-40, with nothing in my pockets and the sound of their car disappearing into the distance, I had no choice but to find another option, and I did. I found Darlene, and I found June, and I found a phone on a wall and a cousin who answered on the first ring. It turns out that once you know how to find that, you can't go back to pretending you can't. I didn't cut my mother off. I didn't write her a letter. I didn't make a scene at the baby shower or demand an apology in front of witnesses. I just quietly adjusted the amount of access she had to me, the way you adjust a thermostat, gradually enough that the room takes a while to notice it's gotten cooler. Some people think that's not enough. I've had friends tell me I should have confronted them more directly, that I owe it to myself to say everything out loud. Maybe they're right, but I think what I owe myself is peace, and this is the way I found it. The last thing I want to say is about Darlene's jacket. A few months after everything, I mailed Patton's Diner a thank you note. I looked them up, found an address, wrote it out by hand. I told them what had happened and what the kindness of those two women had meant to me on one of the worst days I could remember. I didn't expect to hear back. About 3 weeks later, I got a postcard in the mail. It had a picture of the Tennessee state bird on the front, the northern mockingbird. On the back, in handwriting I didn't recognize, it said, "Glad you made it. Come back sometime and the coffee is on us. June and Darlene." I have that postcard on my fridge. Every single day I look at it, and every single day I think, there are people in this world who will hand a stranger a jacket off their own back and not ask for anything in return. There are people who will drive 2 hours and 40 minutes on a Saturday afternoon because someone called and asked for help. There are people who will put a plate of eggs in front of you and tell you to eat in a voice that doesn't invite discussion. Those people are not always the ones who are supposed to love you, but they are the ones who show you what love actually looks like. And once you see that, really see it, you stop settling for anything less.